Last Blacks in the Bible. And we are at the very last, or the very last chapter. I know it's sad. Actually, it's a good thing because by now you've probably gotten much more knowledge than most people would even care to even, you know, get into. But with that, we're just going to dig right into it. And it's chapter 19, Abraham's prophecy. Pretty much, I start off the chapter by basically saying, if you were to look for um, evidence of most of this stuff in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament, you're not going to find it. You'll be hard pressed to find it. You're not going to find, I think I say, chariots in the Red Sea. You're not going to find evidence that the Israelites from the Sinai Peninsula. You're not going to find literal evidence of Joshua's conquering of Canaan. You're not even going to find evidence of an ancient Temple of Solomon. You're not going to find this stuff. Um, based on actual harsh empirical evidence, I mean, it would kind of leave you to believe that all this is just, it's fake, or it's not existent. Matter of fact, when we go to Galatians 4:24, it refers to the Abrahamic story as allegory. Now, some people are like, well, that really means that, I'm not here to get into interpretations or whatever. I'm just here to tell you what the Bible says, what this thing is. Um, However, what most people can agree on is that it's a book of prophecy. And being a book of prophecy, that means that no matter how, we'll say, crazy the uh, initial illustration is, um, you know, it's like when the actual prophecy comes to pass, then things start to make sense. Almost like when we think about Joseph and Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh had a dream about wheat and cows and stuff like that. It makes no sense, right? But it was talking about the famine. And when the famine finally came, and it was like, oh, well, the wheat, okay, so now the wheat meant the years and the fat. No, oh, okay. Now it's starting to make sense. And that's pretty much what I want to just kind of touch on right now. So when we start talking about Egypt or Israel or whatever, on the whole, a lot of there's really no evidence. It really doesn't make much sense. But if we look at it as a prophecy, then, when we look at it in the future context, it starts to make a little bit more sense when it comes to the people that it's supposed to come to. So with that, we're going to get into the first section, which is the prophecy. The Bible states in Genesis 15:13 through 16. It's also echoed in Acts 7, 6 through 7. And I'm just going to read it for you right here. The Lord said to Abraham, "You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, and they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. After 4 generations, your descendants will return here to this land, and for the land of the Amorites, descendants of the son of a son of Canaan, do not warrant your destruction." So with that, we're just going to jump right into the next uh, the next section, which is strangers, which says that your descendants will be a stranger um, in a foreign land. Um, but one thing to note, I mean, obviously he's talking to Abraham, right? And after um, he gets the name Abraham, after his name is changed from Abram to Abraham, um, this is what God tells him in Genesis 17:8. And I will give thee and thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all of the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So here, God is telling Abraham, Canaan is the strange land, the land with all these, white folks, invaders, or whatever. Like, this is the land. Oh, here it comes. Oh, I guess it's more dusty than I thought it was around here, but no, just one. Okay. But we're talking about Canaan as the strange land. Um, and I have here Canaan is referred to as titles similar to strange land more than any other named land in the Bible. So when we talk about Egypt and Canaan, and here comes part two. Thank you if you blessed me. Bless you if you didn't bless me. Um, but of all the names in the Bible for lands, Canaan is referred to as the strange land more than any other land. Um, now, and pretty much, one of the things that I like to note is why they call it a strange land. It's not because of the terrain. It's not because of the weather. It's not because of any of that stuff. Because humans can survive in pretty much any condition. You know, the only thing that makes a land particularly strange is the people that live in it. And I think we're gonna go. Um, well, yeah, and even then, when we look at Abraham, he's looking at a people who look nothing like him. I mean, he's a black man. And there's a lot of crazy white folks running around. This is what the Bible says. It's not me. They would have looked nothing like him. They engaged in all these customs and everything like that. And even then, like when God was gonna wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah and all this other stuff, he says, "Well, find me one good person or whatever." And that's just a whole, get into the Bible, do your research. This is gonna take me to the next point. Um, let me just make sure. Is slaves. Yeah, we're just gonna get into it, which is slaves. Um, when we talk about the strange land or strange people, um, here's the thing: it's not strange to be barbaric. I think that's one thing that people kind of get hung up on. Yes, Europeans or Europe or whatever, it's described as being barbaric, barbarous, just pretty much a fearful, greedy people. Like, this is the Bible talking. But that's not strange. That's not strange at all. Like, for instance, like if you were to go into an MMA gym and get punched in the face, not that strange, right? But if you were to go to like Disney World and get punched in the face, um, then we got, some, then we got some contention there. And as far as slavery or whatever is concerned, especially when we look at here in the United States or whatever, it's in a sense it's not strange to subjugate and it's not strange to enslave a people. It is strange, however, to do that when you say that you do it under the guise of a loving and just God, which is what under the guise of Christianity and what which was done. Um, the second part that I kind of want to get into, I mean, I could go hours into that, but the second part I want to get into is that it says they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. Now, this couldn't have been talking about the Israelites in Egypt, as far as the Bible is concerned, because they weren't oppressed the whole time they were there. Most of the time that they were there, um, you know, when Joseph and everything was there, they were living good. They even when they were being oppressed, they were living in the best of the land. Because remember when Joseph was still alive or whatever, the Pharaoh said you could choose the best of the land, put your people there, it's all good. So along those lines, they weren't oppressed for 400 years. That as I just went into, they assimilated. They got a lot of their cultures, customs, beliefs, pretty much everything from Egypt. So it's got to be talking about another people in another time, right? Then I just put Africans in the Americas, particularly the United States, have been oppressed blatantly and subliminally for about 400 years, and are the same people that fit the same physical and circumstantial descriptions as the Israelites and the Egyptians of the Bible. So obviously, We know what this is, right? And well, let's talk about it, right? Because we're talking about slaves and slavery, and I know there's a lot of people that they kind of cringe or they say, "Oh man, here he goes talking about all this slave stuff or whatever again." And let me tell you what the Bible has to say about slavery, right? Um, in the original King James version, there was no mention of the word. Let's see, let's see. I'm just gonna get into it. You know, this term slavery, slave or whatever, it only comes into being maybe two or three times in the entire original King James Bible, right? And I'm gonna go into these verses for you. Jeremiah 2:14. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? And if you know anything about the Bible, particularly when it comes to bad stuff, it's like a descending scale, I guess, right? So when it says a servant, or are you a slave? You know, it's like servant, that's like higher up, slave is kind of like lower down. We see this in Leviticus 26. You know, when God talks about the bad stuff, he says, you know, if you do wrong, I'm going to punish you times seven. You keep doing that, I'm times more seven. You keep doing wrong, I'm times that by seven. Like it just gets, decreasingly worse. So in a sense, by the Bible is differentiating the terms slave and servant in the original King James. And even then, like we're gonna go down a little bit, the term slaves, right? Because I was slave. Now slaves in the plural is used twice, and we're gonna go into those. Revelation 8:13. The Bible states that everyone who was involved in the trading of slaves, among other luxuries, will watch their kingdom, it's Babylon in this verse, be brought down. And I'm going to read this for you. In a single moment, all the wealth of the city is gone, and all the captains of the merchant ships and their passengers and sailors and crews will stand at a distance. They will cry out as they watch their city um, go into smoke. It talks about the sailors and the crew or whatever. But one thing I also want to bring up is that it talks about the passengers, um, who may or may not have anything to do with anything. It's pretty much one of those things where if you're a people who benefited by what's going on, as far as the Bible is concerned, you are just as guilty as anybody else, right? I'm not here bringing fire and brimstone or whatever. I mean, this is what it says, because I know that there's a lot of good-hearted people are out there or whatever, and they're just like, well, I don't agree with that. I'm just gonna stay back. I'm gonna be a nice person, right? But still don't do anything to rectify the situation. You're going to be one of the passengers, like as far as the Bible is concerned. Um, and uh, that's pretty much what this is. Let's see if there's anything else I'm missing. Um, but yeah, it just says this seems to line up with exactly the next prophecy. The next part of that prophecy in the Abrahamic prophecy was, "But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth." So, I don't want to sit here and say, "Well, this is on the decline and this and that." That all that stuff is not in my territory to describe at this time. But you know, that's what the point that I was trying to get to is that was talking about um the original King James Bible. It only mentioned slavery like three times, two or three times. When we go into these modern Bibles, right? We'll go into the Net Bible, the NET, and slave is used up to three times, which is like bigger than the number that slave was mentioned in the entire King James period, right? And then we look at let's see, slavery, which is mentioned 19, and then the word slaves, which means 92, and the word slave itself comes up 126 times. So how do we come from two to, I don't know, over 300 times almost as much as they say slave or something to that effect, almost as much as they say blood in the Bible, which is crazy, right? So it's almost like when you think about it, the Bible is a business, and a business lives to serve its customers. So it's consciously, subconsciously, whatever they can do to sell this thing to you, they're going to. And if it's on the mind of, if slavery is just on the mind of people, that's what's going to reflect in the Bible. That's just what's going to reflect there. So, I mean, here we're seeing uh obviously there's got to be, even biblically speaking, there's some elephant in the room. Like, you don't jump from like 2 to like 300, and we're just supposed to be, we're over slavery. We're done, and we're past that. Obviously, if they feel that if the Bible revisitors, revisers, or whatever feel the need to, I guess, get into this stuff or whatever, switch some stuff around in regards to slavery or whatever, take a second look at it, then anybody else should be able to as well. Especially, I'll say, black folks or whatever that really get into and feel in line with this stuff. But with that, I'm gonna end that, and we're gonna get into the next section, which is promised return. I'm running out of time here. After 4 generations, your descendants will return to this land here, for the sins of the Amorites, or descendants of the son of Canaan, do not yet warrant their destruction. And pretty much, I'm just gonna make this plain and simple. It says, after 4 generations, your descendants will return. Da 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 da. I just want to take you through with this. Okay, we have Abraham. That is generation one. We have Isaac. That is generation two. We have Jacob. That's generation three. And then we have Joseph, generation four. And where did Joseph end up? Egypt. Okay, well, I'll take it another generation. Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's kids. Where did they grow up? Egypt. It says after 4 generations or whatever, you're going to return. So here they go, returning. They're in Egypt. Now, obviously, if we're looking at the Bible as a book of, I guess, history or whatever, if you're going to return to this promised land or whatever, then why did they return to Egypt or whatever? And if we're looking at it as more of a book of prophecy, then it's one of those. I think it's more of one of those things where it's going to take multiple successive generations to get back. It's going to take about 4 generations. I mean, after 400 years of bullshit, it's going to take a lot of time to, um, to get right, in essence. And some say we're already on that path. Maybe I don't know what generation I fit into or a part of. I don't know. All I know is that I'm playing my part. And at the end of the day, it's going to be what it's going to be. Um, and even then, as far as the actual land or return, what's going to happen, that type of thing, uh, I can't tell you, but, we're talking about Abraham, right? So it's kind of, I mean, let's just see. And I thought it was interesting. In Genesis 13:1, it states, and Abraham went out of Egypt, and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, to the south. However, in the modern translation, the NLT would read something like, so Abraham left Egypt, traveled north to the Negev, along with his wife, Lot, and all that they owned. So here we have the Bible telling right after Egypt, he went south for some reason. And anything south of Egypt is more of Africa. And then it's just kind of been blatantly switched to say north. Now, obviously, I live by the sword, die by the sword. Some people that say, well, you did say, and there were times in your book that you pointed out that, sometimes they made corrections. Is this a correction? I don't know. All I know is that it's here. The next section I want to get into is New Egypt. And pretty much I start off this section by pretty much telling you, like, there is more evidence of Israel in Egypt than there is an actual Israel. There's more evidence of ancient Israel in Egypt than in any other land or whatever. And I put, as I said before, it could be argued that Israel itself is a host of Egyptians who left Egypt to engage in their own form of worship, But that's a different discussion for a different day, pretty much after you're done with this, hopefully you get into some deeper stuff, and we can kind of continue the dialogue. But excuse me, for what it is, I mean, that's what's up. Um, let's see. But like I said, there's a new Egypt, right? And it's one of those things where you kind of look at it, and when we look at the old Egypt, well, why did they talk about it? Why did they talk about Egypt the way that they did? And I haven't here, like, no people are without faults, or reprimands or consequences for certain negative actions or scriptures. I mean, everybody's subject to the laws of karma, cause and effect. Second of all, it could be argued that Egypt was losing much of its splendor, due to repeated attacks and attempts to control, that has lasted thousands of years by the Arabs, Middle Persians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Hyksos, Greeks, Romans, etc. I mean, if we look at Egypt and Africa in general, Africans in general, we're a very accepting people. Everybody that's came into Africa has brought nothing. Let me repeat that. Everybody that's come into Africa has brought nothing. And I know people like to say, well, nowadays they're bringing food and they're helping little African babies and whatever. But it's like, why are their conditions the way they are like that in the first place? Right? If you really want to help, then leave. Like, if you really want to help, I mean, how is Africa the most richest continent in the world? And all of a sudden, everybody's just broke and starving. How is that? you know. But that's more of a political thing. I could go into that, but what? I guess I gotta kind of just get back to the ancient Egyptians, ancient Africans, or whatever. Pretty much when the empire is on the decline, many of the customs and beliefs used to aid its rise to prominence are broken down and often exploited against them. I wish I can go deeper into that. The people who attempted to copy what they could from Egypt, to the other people who put the Bible together, came in at the weakest point of Egypt's decline, and the spirituality of this land has been told from a perspective whose people could barely understand the concepts. So I mean, that kind of just explains it all. Like, I guess I could just leave it at that. Why is Egypt kind of seen as so demonic or whatever like that? That's because the people that put this thing together they didn't have the mental capacity to understand what the hell it is that they were really talking about, among other things. But pretty much, um, as I kind of allude to, there is a new Israel, and that fits the Israelite, I guess, prophecies a lot better. And then there's a new Egypt or whatever. And as we get down, Deuteronomy 28, 68, under the worldwide bondage and dispersal, it says that God would bring Israel back from Egypt by way of ships and auction them off. Well, obviously, like, uh, you don't need a ship to go from Egypt to Israel. You don't need a ship to do that. You can walk there. And it's one of those things where that's what the Bible is talking about. Egypt was a byword. Remember, it wasn't, for what it's worth, it wasn't supposed to be taken literally. Um, it's talking about a different Egypt. But here's the thing. I want to go to Isaiah 27:12 and 13. Yet the time will come when the Lord will gather them together like handpicked grain, one by one. He will gather them from the Euphrates River to the east brook of Egypt in the west. Um, in that day, a great trumpet will sound. Many people who are dying in exile in Assyria and Egypt will return to Jerusalem and worship the God on the holy mountain. And I put the Euphrates River, and Assyria represents the east and Egypt represents the west. So pretty much, Egypt, the west, Western hemisphere, Western society, Western philosophy, and the east, are going to come together. And that's pretty much what I think this is talking about. And I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna kind of breeze through this. But Jeremiah 16:14 through 15 states, "But the time is coming, saith the Lord, when people who are taking an oath will no longer say, As surely as the Lord lives, who rescued the people of Israel from the land of Egypt. Instead, they will say, As surely as the Lord who lives, who brought the people of Israel back to their land from the land of the north and the countries from which they have had been expelled. For I will bring them to the land and that I gave their ancestors." So, pretty much what it's saying is, people aren't even going to say, blessed be God who brought the Israelites out of Egypt. They're going to say, blessed be God who brought, all these people that were scattered or whatever. Like, there's going to be a second Exodus, that what the Bible says, that is going to put the first to shame. It's not just going to be from one land. It's going to be from all over the world, and it's all going back to, one place. And I think that it's kind of just kind of I'll say important to point out that the Bible thought it'd be appropriate to bring the land of the north as well, to kind of hold Europe or Europeans or whatever responsible for a lot of this stuff. But this is I get into there's a lot more on that. I'll get into that later. Actually, I won't. But let's see. Just like there's signs for the old Egypt, or for Israel, for the new Israel and the new Egyptians, there's sign for the new Egypt. And the first thing to note is that Egypt will have vast control over the world's wealth and resources. The second point is that to note that New Egypt will be heavily militarized. The third is that there would be growing dissatisfaction between the citizens and the headship of this new Egypt, particularly towards the decline of the empire. We could see this in the mixed multitude, right, that left. And let's see. I just put, any people that are presently content with the workings of the establishment have no need to leave it. The final thing is that that the people will become very idolatrous, and pretty much, obviously, how do we who is Egypt, right? Some people can say it was the United States, particularly. It's just a Western society. I think that it's kind of more of that type of thing. Everybody's um, we talk about control. Everybody's fighting for control. Everybody wants to get their military up and everything like that. I wish that I could just go into all this stuff, but I really am getting short on time. But obviously people are getting pissed. I mean, we're talking about the march on Wall Street, or the sit-in, or whatever the hell that was called. People are getting really dissatisfied with the system. And when we talk about idolatrous, come on. I mean, we just look at TV, right? We look at stuff like American Idol. Like, we look at stuff like, we have Stars, right? We have, all this other stuff. Like, I don't want to get too into it, but I mean, just look at the culture. Like, I'm not sitting here preaching to anybody like blah 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 like a lot of other people might be, but I'm just saying, well, just look around. I don't have to preach to you. Just look around. I guess to go along with the point that people are tired of what's going on or whatever, you can couple this with the fact of another prophecy that kind of states that knowledge will increase. That's Daniel 12:4. We live in a time where there's we got the internet, we have books, you have access to anybody and pretty much any bit of information in the world. That's probably how you're like watching me right now, is because of that same technology, of that same knowledge. And that's how this book was made, because of access to different, I say, technologies and thoughts that people in the past haven't been. But along those lines, we're going to jump to the next one, which is Return to Homeland. And pretty much, there's going to be, prophecies or whatever, a new Israel, a new thing or whatever. And some people say it's already happened, for whatever reason, and others they're thinking about a literal exodus to Egypt. right? And some say it's more, it's Africa, whatever it is, you know, we need to get back to ourselves first. I put here, the Bible states that God does not dwell in the tents made of human hands, and that people are to worship in spirit and in truth. It also states that the body is a temple. And we look at temple, we think about the temple in Jerusalem. A definition of Jerusalem can to be safe in body and mind or estate, or to be at peace. So before we start talking about building new temples and going all over the world and getting back and all this other stuff, like, we need to be at peace with ourselves first, and we need to kind of come together amongst ourselves before we start doing all this other stuff. But I know there's gonna be a lot more on that. But that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave that off right here. This is Standards and Blacks in the Bible. I'm Raday Leavy. I'm just so happy that if you're here, you made it this far. Hopefully you got some good stuff. Don't stop the knowledge rush. There's a lot more to learn. This is like step one. There's a lot more to go. Like I said, this is just biblical stuff, but everything I'm telling you can be found in other books, in other resources. Do research on other black scholars. There's a lot of great books that you can get into. Like I said, a book that I'm getting into now is Secrets of the Exodus, and it's a bad book. So please, continue to do whatever you need to do. With that, I just want to say thank you one more time. I'm cutting out, and just keep in touch with the Facebook, blog, Twitter, YouTube. I'm always gonna try to put some great stuff out there, and just keep watching for your boy, because I will have other books coming out, music, all kinds of other stuff coming at you.